They broke a heart that only ever wanted to love honestly. And now, whether they admit it or not, the memory of what they did follows them like a shadow they cannot outrun, because betraying a good heart doesn't end when they walk away. In many ways, that is where their haunting begins. Listen closely. There is a strange pain in this world that few people talk about. The pain of being deeply wounded by someone you were gentle with, someone you trusted, someone you chose with sincerity. You gave them softness in a hard world. You gave them patience when others would have given anger. You gave them loyalty in a time when loyalty feels rare. And somehow, they still chose to hurt you. At first, it feels like injustice. It feels like goodness lost. It feels like the universe made a cruel mistake. But life carries laws deeper than what eyes can see. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And that is where their punishment quietly begins. Not always in public downfall, not always in dramatic karma, but in private silence, in restless nights, in moments where your memory returns uninvited, reminding them they destroyed something pure. Because people can replace faces, but they cannot easily replace how a genuine heart made them feel. And when they finally meet coldness after leaving warmth, emptiness after losing depth, noise after abandoning peace, that is when your absence becomes their haunting. Part 1. The weight of losing something rare. There is a painful truth about human nature. We often overlook what is quietly precious because it feels constant, like air, unnoticed, until it becomes difficult to breathe. That's how many people treat a good heart. When someone is endlessly patient with them, forgiving, understanding, emotionally present, they mistake that rare love for something ordinary. They assume kindness will always be there. They think sincere hearts are easy to find. They believe loyalty is common. But life has a way of teaching brutal lessons. Sooner or later, they meet people who wear masks instead of truth. They encounter affection that is transactional. Conversations become shallow. Loyalty becomes convenience. What once felt deep becomes painfully artificial. And suddenly, memory begins speaking. They remember how safe they felt with you. They remember the way you listened. Not to reply, but to understand. They remember your quiet sacrifices they never thanked you for. Your heart becomes a comparison point against everything hollow that follows. Nietzsche wrote, "Invisible threads are the strongest ties." That is why even after distance, after silence, after pretending they moved on, something inside them still pulls toward the memory of what they lost. Not because they necessarily miss your face, but because they miss how real they were allowed to feel around you. And here is the deeper truth. A person may escape consequences outside themselves. But escaping inner regret is much harder. Regret sits quietly. It whispers at midnight. It revisits old memories unexpectedly. It turns ordinary moments into reminders of what could have been. That is haunting. That is the quiet consequence of betraying goodness. Part 2. The soul is disturbed by what it knows it destroyed. There is something mysterious about conscience. People can lie to others. They can create stories that make them look innocent. They can justify betrayal by saying, "I had my reasons," or "things changed," or "it just happened." They can dress selfishness in beautiful language and call it truth. But beneath every excuse, beneath every performance, beneath every mask they wear for the world, there is the silent witness within. And that witness knows. It knows who stayed honest. It knows who remained loyal. It knows who loved sincerely. And it knows exactly who broke trust. This is why many people who betray genuine hearts often become strangely restless afterward. Outwardly, they may seem fine. They may smile in pictures. They may move on quickly. They may appear untouched by what happened. But appearances can be theater. Inside, something unsettles them. because the soul recognizes destruction, especially when it destroys innocence. Imagine someone carelessly burning down a quiet house, only to realize later it was the only home where they ever truly belonged. They can build bigger houses, they can decorate new rooms, they can invite different people inside, yet nothing feels like home. That emptiness becomes unbearable because memory keeps comparing what is with what once was. Buddha taught, what you think you become, what you feel you attract, what you imagine you create. When betrayal becomes part of a person's inner life, it shapes them in hidden ways. Distrust grows, peace fades, their heart becomes heavier. They struggle to believe in sincerity because they once stood in front of sincerity and chose to wound it. That realization becomes a mirror they avoid, but never fully escape. And perhaps this is why some people suddenly return years later, not because time magically changed their heart, but because distance gave them perspective. Life showed them what rare love actually looked like, and conscience kept reminding them whose hands let it slip away. Your kindness becomes their ghost, your loyalty becomes their lesson, your absence becomes their unanswered question, and the painful irony. The very heart they undervalued becomes the standard by which every future connection quietly fails. Part 3. When life reflects your value through loss. There is a moment in every story of betrayal that feels almost poetic in its cruelty, when the same person who once took your kindness for granted suddenly finds themselves starving for it in others. At first, they don't notice it. They move forward thinking freedom is happiness. They convince themselves that walking away from a good heart was necessary or meant to be, or even growth. They chase novelty. They chase attention. They chase the illusion that something better is always waiting. But life does not operate on illusions. It operates on reflection, and slowly, quietly, without announcement, life begins to mirror their choices back at them. They meet people who are emotionally unavailable. They meet people who disappear without explanation. They meet people who take more than they give. They meet people who only stay when it is convenient. And suddenly, the absence of your consistency becomes impossible to ignore because your love was not loud, it was stable. Your care was not dramatic, it was constant. Your presence was not flashy, it was grounding. And now, everything they encounter feels like emotional instability in comparison. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." What they fail to realize is that fate is not punishing them. It is reflecting them. The kind of energy they gave out is now the kind they keep receiving back, and that is where the haunting deepens. Because memories don't come back as nostalgia anymore. They come back as comparison. Every disappointment whispers your name in silence. Every cold interaction reminds them of your warmth. Every inconsistency echoes your patience. And worst of all, they begin to understand something painful. You were not just another person. You were the standard they didn't appreciate until it disappeared. This is where regret transforms from thought into emotion, from emotion into weight, from weight into haunting. Because now they don't just miss you, they miss how they felt about themselves when they were loved by you and safe, valued and seen. And once a person loses that kind of love, life rarely gives it back in the same form. Part 4. The haunting is not about you. It is about what they became without you. There comes a stage where silence becomes louder than words. Not your silence, but theirs. Because after all the choices, all the distance, all the justifications they made to move on from you, something begins to settle in the quiet corners of their life. And that something is not your voice, not your face, not even your absence in the physical sense. It is the awareness of who they are now, compared to who they were when your good heart still accepted them. People rarely realize this. Betrayal does not just end a connection, it alters identity. They change after losing you, but not always in ways they expect. At first, they may feel free, untangled, relieved, but freedom without emotional depth slowly becomes emptiness, wearing a mask of independence. And in that emptiness, reflection grows sharper. They begin to notice how rare genuine understanding was, how rare patience was, how rare emotional safety was, and how easily they confused loyalty for something replaceable. But some things are not replaceable, only recognizable after loss. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Yet most people learn this truth too late. They realize they had power over their choices, but not over the consequences those choices planted inside them. Because consequences do not always look like punishment. Sometimes they look like awareness that arrives slowly over time. A conversation that feels empty, a relationship that lacks depth. A night where everything seems fine, but nothing feels meaningful, and in those moments, your memory returns not as pain, but as truth. Not "I miss them," but "I lost something real." That is the final stage of haunting, when denial collapses and reality becomes impossible to avoid. And here is the final truth of this story. You are not haunting them intentionally. You are not returning to their life. You are not speaking from beyond anything. You are simply what authenticity looks like in memory, and contrast reveals it endlessly. Because once someone has been loved by a good heart and chosen betrayal in return, they carry both things forever. What they received and what they destroyed. And between those two memories, they begin to understand something profound. Not everyone who leaves is free, and not everyone who is left behind is lost. Sometimes, the one who was betrayed walks away healed, and the one who betrayed stays behind, quietly haunted by their own choices. So, if you are the one who was betrayed, understand this. Your value did not decrease when they failed to see it. Your goodness was not a weakness. It was rarity in a world that often confuses depth for convenience. And if you are the one who was hurt, you were not forgotten by life. You were redirected. Because sometimes the universe does not punish you by taking people away. It protects you by revealing who they truly are. And in the end, the greatest peace is this. You no longer need to chase closure from those who lost something they cannot replace. Because time will always do what truth cannot say out loud. It reveals.